Donald Trump knows that the reporters who he works with on a daily basis and who he knows personally, that they would not follow these rules and it wouldn't fly over the White House. I'm curious to see if Trump, throttles this one back a bit. I'm not certain if he understood the question that he was asked as he was walking to Marine One the other day, but he did say, "Look, reporters always find a way to get to the story."
Hi, I'm Maddie, Hale, and welcome to the Trump Report. Today I've got Philip Wegmann, a White House reporter from Real Clear Politics, joining the show. And just a reminder that you can watch us every day, Monday through Friday on Times Radio's YouTube, or you can stream us as a podcast wherever you get your podcasts. Phil, thank you so much for joining the Trump Report today.
Thank you for having me.
Let's start off with Donald Trump and RFK's big announcement. On Sunday, we saw Trump take the stage at Charlie Kirk's memorial. He said that he believes that they have found an answer to autism. By Monday, Trump and RFK held their press conference where they announced findings that they had made on autism and certain drugs. Just for our audience, a few of the things that Trump announced. He said that Trump said that pregnant women should avoid Tylenol, claiming it causes autism in children. Trump announced that the FDA would issue warnings that Tylenol is not safe in pregnancy unless essential. RFK said the FDA would also approve Leucovorin for children with autism for modest improvements. And Trump and RFK also both claimed that autism rates were increasing and pushed for more research into environmental and developmental contributors. So, I mean, Phil, were you and fellow White House reporters really expecting an announcement and these findings from the Trump administration?
We knew that there was going to be something. You had the Health and Human Services Secretary promising for some time that he was going to be making his findings available. What I was struck by yesterday, though, was the fact that even Donald Trump himself couched some of these findings. He said that there are some studies that suggest that Tylenol, specifically the active ingredient acetaminophen, can cause trouble for pregnant women during their pregnancies, and to avoid it. He didn't say that Tylenol specifically causes autism so much as that could increase the possibility. And here, the medical literature, I don't think it's split so much as there are a handful of studies, certainly studies worth paying attention to, that says that this may be a risk. The White House is pointing in particular to a new study that was co-authored by a Harvard professor, but this was hardly the smoking gun that a lot of the Make America Healthy Again folks wanted. What was most notable yesterday, beyond the denunciation of Tylenol on the off chance that it could cause autism during pregnancy, was that RFK Jr. said that they were going to continue to investigate the causes of autism itself, and he said that this was likely going to lead to the federal government focusing on vaccines. So there was a lot to take in.
What about how the science and medical community has reacted to this, Phil? Has there been a lot of pushback on these claims?
There has been pushback, and we saw some of it trickle out yesterday on the specific claims. But I think more generally, what we're living through is the COVID hangover. Here in the United States, trust in public institutions is at an all-time low. And so, if you were going to have someone who is going to disrupt the medical establishment, disrupt, the medical bureaucracy, like RFK Jr., now would be the time to do it.
Well, even that with Donald Trump, are we circling back to COVID times, Phil, when Trump would, come under fire for certain medical claims, such as COVID, when he said that, injecting bleach or powerful light would help cure it. He also said hydrochloroquine as a COVID treatment. And if we take us back to that, really did, hurt his re-election campaign quite a bit.
No, and it certainly did hurt his reelection campaign in the moment. It was a once in a generation pandemic. Certainly, we hope it was once in a generation. The Trump administration, they would quibble though with your assessment. They would say that the president was not literally pressing anyone to inject bleach, but this does show the risks here when politics and public health mix. And frankly, I think that a lot of Americans, they heard things on the other side. They heard from Dr. Anthony Fauci about the efficacy of masks. about the effects of vaccines. And some of those promises from Fauci and others later turned out to be either not true or not totally true. And so this is fertile ground for a skeptic like Donald Trump and RFK Jr. to come in and say, we're going to re-examine all of our priors.
Let's move on to what's happening today. Donald Trump will speak at the UN General Assembly in New York City. He will also hold bilateral and multilateral meetings, one of which will be with Ukrainian President Vladimir Zelensky, with 10 other leaders. So the meeting with Zelensky occurs at the same time that Putin has proposed extending Russia's nuclear treaty with the US for another year. Now, do you think we'll see Trump show his allegiance to Ukraine today in the wake of Putin? In the wake of him saying that Putin has let him down?
Maddie, this is not the news cycle that I expected, and certainly not the one that Donald Trump did. I think all of us in the press knew that this boast that he was going to wrap up the Ukraine war in 48 hours, that was obviously too good to be true. But if you would have told me 6 months ago that Donald Trump would have not only grown much closer to Zelensky after he threw him out of the Oval Office when they had this very famous back and forth, this very big argument. Zelensky, he clearly misread the situation. But if you would have told me that he would have grown closer to Zelensky and then also grown closer to NATO, I don't know if I would have believed you. So Trump goes into this UN meeting. Yes, there's a lot of disagreement on other issues like Israel and Palestine, but on the war in Ukraine, he's much closer to European allies than he was previously. And his patience isn't just waning with Vladimir Putin. I think it's gone.
Mm. And then the other thing, Phil, is that this UN General Assembly, it's only taking place months after the assembly before last in February, where we saw the United States voting alongside Russia, which meant that they would publicly not condemn the war. So I wonder, does Donald Trump have a bit of making up to do when it comes to being in the face of these UN members?
It's a good question. My suspicion is that the United States didn't take that vote because, I mean, the U.S. is the number one supplier of military aid to Ukraine currently. There's no doubt about where this country comes down on that war. But in the moment, I think that the administration didn't want to antagonize Russia even further. There was hopes that this meeting in Anchorage could yield fruit. Obviously, that has not happened. I don't think, though, that Donald Trump is going to do anything approaching eating crow in New York. Instead, I think it's going to be very much the latter. This is his fifth address at the UN. And I've got to tell you, this is a president who relishes it. He loves this stage because every time he addresses the United Nations, it's an opportunity for him to level set and argue that his vision of nationalism is superior to the global system that he believes has ripped off the United States. And I've got to say, I think it was 2019 when Donald Trump was there in New York. And he warned the German delegation that they were growing too close to Russia, that they were too dependent on that foreign country's oil. You had the German delegation actually laughing on camera, and it turned out Donald Trump was correct. Those German diplomats, they have since left the Foreign Service.
And then also the other thing is that you mentioned he loves the stage, Phil, but will we see a bit of another campaign, a vie for a Nobel Peace Prize today when he gets up and does his speech about how many wars he's, I guess, put to bed?
Yeah, Donald Trump is not subtle about what he wants, and he would very much like the Nobel Peace Prize. There's an argument when it comes to some of these conflicts that he did play a very active role. He had European leaders at the White House previously, Azerbaijan and others to sign peace treaties. There's some debate over whether or not he was actually as involved as he likes to let on in helping the tensions to simmer between India and Pakistan. But look, I mean, he wants this war in Ukraine to end, and he has strong convictions about bringing it to a close. But his belief on how it should close, who should give up what territory, that's sort of loosely held, right? I think he just wants to get to an end here. Whether that's enough to impress The Nobel Prize committee is uncertain.
Let's get into what's happening with Pete Hegseth and the Pentagon, Phil. So he's cracked down on these leaks. He's continued to add to that in the last few days. He's restricting journalists. So basically, now journalists are required to sign a pledge that they will not publish information that hasn't been authorized for release, even if it is unclassified. And if they do break this pledge, then they'll have their press credentials revoked. They're also not allowed to willingly roam the halls and have access to certain offices closed. Some journalists have also lost their working spaces, which I'm sure you've seen as a White House reporter, where some journalists are no longer, I guess, in the press room. So Pentagon service members and civilians are also now limited to what events they can attend or speak at. So, Phil, of course, as I mentioned, you're a White House reporter. How will this hurt access for journalists and also military sources that want to come forward and speak about certain things?
Good reporters are going to find a way to still get the story. Often, you actually don't have to be on location to get the best stories. I mean, often what's really happening behind the scenes isn't what's happening there in the press room. But I've got to say, I mean, there are restrictions at the White House. There's only so many places that you can go. And obviously, Maddie, I mean, when we work with sources, there are things that are embargoed, there are conditions that are placed. But these restrictions that Pete Hegseth and his team have thought up are pretty ridiculous. That prohibition on having a press pass at the Pentagon, if you publish information that they don't want public, that would make the job impossible. That would really make these reporters beholden to the administration. I'm thinking of, for instance, the New York Times had, a really fascinating story about a botched SEAL Team 6 raid in North Korea during the last Trump administration. They were obviously publishing information that had been previously classified, but they believed that it was in the public's best interest to know about this mission. The New York Times, they ran through their process to make certain that they were not endangering lives or ongoing operations, and came to the conclusion that it was worth publishing. Under this new system, it seems that they would lose their credentials. And, I'm obviously biased as a reporter myself, but, put me in the camp of folks who are opposed to this. The final thing I'll say is it's, if they want to reduce access to workspace, or if they want to reduce the areas that reporters can roam, that's annoying, but it's not necessarily a threat to the First Amendment. This, though, on the other hand, this sort of sword of Damocles hanging over the head of reporters there, that seems to be an entirely different category. And by cracking down like this, the defense secretary, they seem pretty weak.
Doesn't this go against everything that the Trump administration have been talking about when it comes to freedom of press, freedom of speech?
It certainly does. And look, Donald Trump knows that the reporters who he works with on a daily basis and who he knows personally, that they would not follow these rules and it wouldn't fly over the White House. I'm curious to see if Trump, throttles this one back a bit. I'm not certain if he understood the question that he was asked as he was walking to Marine One the other day, but he did say, look, reporters always find a way to get to the story. So we'll have to see where he comes down.
Do we not find this incredibly hypocritical to be limiting access for reporters to have to the Pentagon and military sources after Pete Hegseth literally put national security at risk when he was talking about war plans of striking Yemen in a Signal group chat not once but twice, Phil?
There have been no restrictions on the defense secretary. Obviously, he has to do his job. I think that, again, I'm biased, but I think that the Pentagon ought to let reporters do their jobs as well.
Let's speak about this viral clip going around of Elon Musk and Donald Trump publicly reuniting, burying the hatchet, some would say, when they see each other at Charlie Kirk's memorial. It sparked a lot of online users speaking about it in the last few days, Phil, where they've spoken about how these two need to end the feud. A lip reader on Fox News was talking about, he said, "So Elon, I've heard you wanted to chat." He said, "Let's try and work out how we get back on track." Musk simply nods and Trump taps his hand and said, "I've missed you." So do you think we'll see these two back on track?
Maybe they will repair the bromance. I mean, Donald Trump and Elon Musk were once inseparable. They were really tied at the hip. The fracture occurred when Musk's time in the administration came to a close because he could only serve as a temporary government employee for so long, and after he really, tried to root out wasteful spending, root and branch, he was aghast to see Republicans move forward with their one big beautiful bill and the multi-trillion dollar price tag there. I'm not certain if this will ease those sort of principled limited government concerns of Elon Musk, but anytime that you have the world's most powerful man, Donald Trump, and the world's richest man, or perhaps he fell to the number two spot. Regardless, anytime you have the two of them reconciling like this, even if it is for a brief moment, to remember their late friend, and he really was a friend. Charlie Kirk was close to both of these men. That's something to watch. We'll see if Elon Musk removes his threat to primary Republicans who love spending quite a bit of money, and we'll see if he does what he did in 2024, open the pocketbook and support the GOP.
Yeah, because we've seen quite a pause in his America Party, Phil. He hasn't really gone through with that, but that may have also been a bit of pressure from Tesla shareholders who want him to scale back political ambitions. So, yeah, you're right. He might just end up being the one that funds Republicans at the primaries next year. But I want to get into these pretty scathing remarks from Jill Biden's former spokesperson Michael LaRosa. He wrote an op-ed for Fox News while crediting Kamala Harris for echoing a similar sentiment in her book that was released today. He wrote that inside the White House, the Regina Georges of Biden's circle ruled like mean girls and policed loyalty. Staff weren't serving a president and first lady, they were serving a cult. You never knew when Regina was in charge or when the Bidens were. It was all blurred. Joe and Jill Biden were warm, decent, empathetic, but they enabled some of the nastiest, most mean-spirited people I've ever encountered in politics. That contradiction defines the Biden era. Biden's final mission, he said, was to save the country from Trump, who Democrats consider to be the ultimate bully, but bullies are everywhere, even among Democrats, and despite his brand, even around Biden. So, Phil, of course, you covered the Biden White House for 4 years. Was that your experience?
There were certainly some phone calls where some sources were unhappy with my reporting, but I've got to say, I did not expect Mean Girls to be the defining political film of our generation. Um, Look, the Biden administration is likely to say that this is a disgruntled staffer. Their problem is that they are confronting more and more disgruntled staffers. The dam broke. It really did during that Atlanta debate when we all saw Biden's diminished condition. Not in, a 5 or 10 minute interaction with reporters on his way to Marine One, but there in front of the public in prime time. He was not the same person. And that immediately begged the question, why didn't we see more of this? And it sort of led the public to the obvious conclusion, which is that he had been bubble wrapped by his staff. Now, a lot of Americans wonder, was President Biden entirely in charge, or was he overly influenced by some of these senior staff? Now, some of those alumni of that administration are pointing fingers at one another, and it clearly got deeply personal. I think that what Michael LaRosa is doing here is, he's adding to that first draft of history. He's saying, look, Biden might have publicly been a nice guy and might have said that he wanted to return the country to decency, but behind the scenes, staff who perhaps had more influence and power than they should have, they were pretty cutthroat.
But your experience, Phil, was that, access to Biden was very limited.
Absolutely.
Even covering from overseas, the amount of press conferences or interviews were nothing.
I mean, Joe Biden had exactly one print interview in 4 years. And I think that whenever a politician hides from the press, they do themselves a disservice, both in the job. I mean, you are a public servant. You also have a responsibility to inform the public about, what it is that you're doing to stand up to scrutiny. But they do themselves a disservice also when they think that their opponents are not going to raise some of these issues as well. I mean, if you have a politician who doesn't want to face criticism in the press and meet it head on. Well, they're going to meet that criticism on a debate stage like Biden did. And, clearly he was rusty. Clearly he had not stood up to that kind of scrutiny previously, and it showed. So don't run away from the press. It's in your best interest.
Absolutely, and that's one thing that you can actually give Donald Trump credit for. He is in the press every moment of the day, especially his first term. So, Philip Wegmann, thank you so much for joining the Trump Report today.
Thank you, Maddie.